In this video, we are going to learn specifically about front-side handlers in DataPower. Now that you have already got an intro of the front-side handler, let's get to the DataPower and see where the front-side handlers are. What you are looking at right now is a screen where you can configure a multi-protocol gateway. As part of front-side protocol, you see several front-side handlers are available. Now, discussing all of them in one video may not be practical. There are lots of them, but it is important to understand what they are and what they are doing here. There are two types of front-side handlers here. Some which get installed on a particular IP and a port, support a protocol, and then listen on that IP port for incoming connection. These are called listeners. You see HTTP handler, HTTPS handler in this list. These are those type of front-side handlers. Second type of front-side handlers are those which logically behaves like a poller. For example, you have some messages sitting on the MQ, you have some messages sitting on the JMS, some on the Kafka topic, and some maybe files sitting on an FTP or sFTP server. How will you get those files? You get to be notified when files files arrive in that particular folder, and you want to bring those files for processing in the DataPower. sFTP poller, FTP poller type of handlers are exactly for that purpose. If you are interested in MQ, then here you see MQ handler. These handlers typically, they poll or they keep watch on a particular queue or topic or on a particular directory for the arrival of information. And as soon as the information comes, they pick it up and they make it available in the DataPower for processing. As I mentioned, it is difficult for us to go through all these front-side handlers. So we'll pick one or two which are most popular, and then we will see key properties that you are supposed to configure to make that front-side handler an active front-side handler. Let's first start with HTTPS. You have an HTTPS handler. You click on it and a configuration screen comes up. It has a variety of parameters over here. And this is the problem with first-time users of the DataPower, that they see a configuration screen which has a variety of parameters. Are they supposed to configure all of them? The answer is no. DataPower has intelligent defaults, and hence you're not supposed to configure all of these to make this object working. So what are the key parameters that you are supposed to provide? Of course, name you need to provide over here. Then you got to provide local IP address. If you are dealing with the DataPower physical appliance, I would suggest to provide anything other than 000. But if you are dealing with the DataPower Docker, do not change it. Leave it as is. Port number, you can provide anything that you wish. Here, the defaults usually work fine, but enabling the get method, which is not enabled by default, usually helps. The key thing to remember here is that you are installing an HTTPS handler. So the use case is that clients are going to connect to this HTTPS handler using HTTPS protocol, and hence DataPower need to act like a server. To act like a server, it needs to provide its certificate as part of HTTPS channel negotiation. We haven't configured that. So where is that? Here, TLS server type at the bottom that you see, it says proxy profile. You need to change it to server profile. Proxy profile is an old one, and server profile is the newer concept. So you should go with server profile, and then you have TLS server profile configuration coming up. Here you need to supply the identification credential, which is primarily made up of two things. One is your private key, which you upload here in the crypto key, and another one is the matching certificate that you apply here. Once you supply these two configurations, you can click on apply button, and then you do not have to configure anything in the TLS server profile. Anything else. Identification credential is sufficient. You click on the apply button, and then you go back to this screen. Your server profile is configured, and your HTTPS handler will work just fine. So this is how you configure the HTTPS handlers in DataPower. Another popular front-side handler is MQ handler. And here you can see there are several MQ handlers present over here. If you are working in a simple use case where you have an MQ setup, you have some data coming up on the queues, and you want to grab that data as soon as it comes, this is the handler for you, the one that I have highlighted right now. Click on the MQ handler, and the handler specific properties will come up. Now, beyond the trivial configuration of providing a name, let's go and check what other information we need to provide to create an absolutely basic minimum MQ handler that can poll messages present on the queues and can bring those messages into the DataPower. So, to connect with an MQ server, the connectivity information is contained in the queue manager. So you got to configure the queue manager. So click on the plus sign and you say MQ queue manager, the first option, and here you have the options. Initially, as I said, the options might seem daunting, but they are not. Here you got to provide the host name and port number of the MQ server. So that is what you are going to provide here. Here you can provide the remote queue manager name. That is what you're going to provide. And here you need to provide the channel name. So these three basic properties you are supposed to provide. Host name, when you provide, you need to provide it something like this: 123.45.12.13 colon and 1414. Okay, so this is a way in which you can provide the host name, or there is another way in which you can provide the host name is like this. Okay, whichever methodology you use doesn't matter. But here you provide the host name. This is the remote queue manager name. Remember, this queue manager name is a remote queue manager name, and it has no bearing with what name you provide here. Here you can provide any name, XYZ, but queue manager name you get from your MQ server administrator. Similarly, the channel name you get to see. Now you see that while I provided all this information, there is no particular information for the queue which I'm supposed to poll. It is because the MQ queue manager only encapsulates the connectivity information to the MQ server. The queue information should not be put over here. So you're going to click on apply button, and a queue manager configuration will appear here. Fine. Now the queues that you're going to poll should be here. So this is get queue and this is put queue. Providing a get queue is essential. It is a star mark because this is the queue from which you are supposed to poll and get the information. What is a put queue? This is an optional configuration. The objective of put queue is that, let us assume that you get information from the get queue. Now you processed it in the DataPower, you supplied it to the backend system, your customized processing, fine. But after that customized processing, do you want to place the response back to another queue? Hey, put queue is here for you. So this is basically for DataPower to put back the acknowledgement, some kind of acknowledgement, or maybe some kind of processed information that other systems might consume. So that is what the put queue is here for. Remaining all configurations, you can keep it as is. They work just fine. As I said, they are intelligent defaults, and you can click on apply. Again, I'm repeating it for your convenience. Queue manager is required. Get queue is required. This is the queue from which you are supposed to get or poll the messages. Put queue is optional. You can have it or you cannot have it, depending upon your application. But the objective of put queue is that whatever information you have processed, and you want to send something back to the MQ system so that other programs can consume it, then put queue is for you. And then you click on apply button and your MQ handler is up and running. So that is how you configure the MQ handler. Now that we have understood about these two types of handlers over here, there are a variety of handlers over here that you can experiment with. Now, configuring and showing all of them would take a great amount of time, so I'm skipping that for now, but I will tell you in summary which one is for what. So AMQP is for Advanced Message Queuing Protocol, and if you are interacting with a system which supplies AMQP, then go for it. MEIG AS2 proxy handler, this is for AS2, AS3 type of messages. Usually these type of messages, they come in a mailbox, and if you configure this handler, you are essentially monitoring a particular mailbox on a particular, and then you, as soon as the messages arrive in there, you are supposed to grab it. I mean, this handler is supposed to grab it and then process it. FTP poller, as the name suggests, it polls an FTP site. NFS poller, it polls an NFS mounted directory. sFTP poller, again, it polls an sFTP site. FTP server handler. If you want your multi-protocol gateway to behave like an FTP server, this is your front side handler, which means that if you create it, somebody who is interacting with your MPGW, they will see it as an FTP server. They will issue the FTP command to interact with it. HTTP and HTTPS handler, I just mentioned what they are. IMS call out and collect handler are primarily for interacting with mainframe system. WebSphere GMS handler is for interacting with a GMS. Remember that DataPower does not have a support for a generic GMS, which means that if you have a GMS queue which is running, for example, other than WebSphere server, then you may not be able to poll it and get messages from there. This might be considered as a limitation, but this is what it is. So WebSphere GMS handler is primarily for interacting with a GMS, which is hosted on WebSphere application server. Kafka handler is new. It can interact with Kafka and can get messages out of that. MQ related handler, you see there are many editions of that. So MQ handler here, IBM MQ handler is the most popular one because it is primarily used to poll messages out of a queue. Now this is file transfer edition, and this is managed file transfer edition. So if you are dealing with those kind of MQ setup, then FTE and MFT would be primarily for you. IBM MQ version 9 handler looks like to be an MQ handler which should be used for MQ version which is greater than 9. POP poller handler is, again, it will poll a particular mailbox which is supplying the POP. You know that IMAP and POP are two different types of protocols for emails. So POP poller handler will poll a particular mailbox supporting POP protocols. sFTP server handler, just like FTP server handler, you can create an sFTP server handler. Anybody interacting with MPGW would consider it as an sFTP server. Stateless raw XML handlers, these are primarily for dealing with raw XML data, stateful and stateless. And that's pretty much about these front-side handlers. So front-side handlers in summary are very versatile object. They give face to your multi-protocol gateway, or for that matter web services proxy, or any other server objects. That's it for today's video. Happy learning.